The lunch tray hit the floor before Do-hyun even
Oh
saw it
man,
coming.
look at that
One
mess.
second, he was walking, head down,
This is
headphones
not
on,
funny.
trying to be invisible the way he had practiced every single day for the past 2 years. The next second, his tray was on the ground. Rice and kimchi soup splattered across the cafeteria floor, and the entire room had gone quiet in that horrible way. The kind of quiet that meant everyone was watching and nobody was going to help. Marcus stood there laughing, his crew falling in behind him like dominoes, their voices overlapping into one ugly sound that bounced off every wall in the room. My bad, Marcus said, not meaning it at all, spreading his hands out like he was innocent. Didn't see you there. Hard to miss something that big though, right? The laughter swelled. Do-hyun stood completely still. His jaw was tight. His hands were balled at his sides. He could feel every single pair of eyes in that cafeteria burning into him, and he did the only thing he knew how to do in moments like this. He bent down, picked up the tray, stacked what he could back onto it, and walked to the nearest trash can without saying a single word. He threw the whole thing away. He wasn't hungry anymore. He walked out of the cafeteria with his headphones back on and his eyes forward, and he did not look back once. Not because he wasn't hurt, but because the moment he let them see the hurt, they would own it. And Do-hyun had decided a long time ago that there were very few things in his life he could control, but that was one of them. He was 17 years old. He had been in America for 2 years. His English was solid, better than most people assumed when they first heard his accent, but that accent was enough for people like Marcus to decide everything they needed to know about him before he ever opened his mouth. He was Korean. He was heavy-set in a school that worshipped athletes. He was quiet in a building that rewarded loudness. He was, by every social calculation this school ran on, invisible, except when they wanted to make him a joke. He found his usual spot at the far end of the second-floor hallway, a bench beside a window that nobody else ever used because the radiator next to it was broken and it got cold in winter. Do-hyun didn't mind the cold. He sat down, pulled out his phone, plugged in his headphones, and opened his production app. He had been working on something new for 3 days. A beat that started low and heavy and then opened up in the middle like a door swinging wide into sunlight. He hadn't named it yet. He never named them until they told him what they were. He pressed play and closed his eyes, and for a few minutes, just a few, the hallway disappeared. Marcus disappeared. The cafeteria disappeared. There was only the music and the way it moved through him like something warm, like the feeling of his mother's cooking on a Sunday morning back in Seoul, like the memory of a version of his life where he didn't have to work so hard just to survive a Tuesday. He didn't notice Nia until she was almost past him. She was hard to miss, which was something Do-hyun had observed from a distance many times without ever letting himself think too much about it. Nia walked through this school the way certain songs entered a room. You felt the shift in atmosphere before you even understood what was happening. She was tall and moved like she knew exactly where she was going even when she didn't. Her friends clustered around her the way people cluster around warmth. Her boyfriend, a loud, broad-shouldered boy named Derek who played varsity basketball and treated the school like his personal stage, was usually attached to her side. Today she was alone. She was walking fast, chin slightly down, and she almost passed the bench entirely before something made her slow. She glanced sideways and saw Do-hyun sitting there with his eyes closed, completely absorbed in whatever was coming through his headphones, and something in her expression shifted. It wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity exactly. It was something harder to name, something like recognition, though she couldn't have explained why. She kept walking. Do-hyun opened his eyes a moment later, sensing something the way you sometimes sense a presence without being able to explain it. The hallway was mostly empty. He looked left and right and saw nothing and went back to his beat. He didn't know yet that anything had changed. Nothing had, not really. Not yet. Before the story continues, kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the conclusion of this story and more intense stories like this. That evening, Do-hyun sat in his bedroom with the door closed and his equipment spread around him like a small world he had built for himself. His desk had 2 monitors, a MIDI keyboard he had saved up for over 8 months of birthdays and holidays combined, and a pair of studio headphones his father had bought him before they left Korea, back when his father still believed that music was something a person could reasonably love without it ruining them. The walls had no posters. Just a small whiteboard where he wrote chord progressions and tempo notes in his own shorthand that nobody else could read. His mother knocked twice and came in with a plate of food and set it beside his keyboard without saying anything. She looked at the screen for a moment, at the waveforms stacked like hills across his monitor, and she put her hand briefly on his shoulder, and then she left. They had always communicated like that, in small gestures, in the language underneath language. It was enough. Do-hyun ate slowly and worked and did not think about the cafeteria. He thought about the beat. He thought about the doors swinging open into sunlight. He thought about what came after the door. He fell asleep at his desk at 2 a.m. with his headphones around his neck and a half-finished bridge sitting on the screen waiting for him to come back to it. The music class announcement came on a Wednesday morning, and it landed differently for different people. Mr. Patterson was the kind of teacher who genuinely believed in what he taught, which made him either inspiring or annoying depending on who you asked. He was tall, wore the same 3 blazers in rotation, and had a habit of pausing mid-sentence to let things sink in, as if every lesson was a sermon and he was giving the congregation time to receive it. He stood at the front of the class with his hands clasped and a small smile on his face that told everyone something was coming that not all of them were going to like. "Final project," he said. "You will be paired. You will create an original song together. You will perform it in front of the class in 4 weeks. The song must have a clear emotional intention, a structure, and both partners must contribute meaningfully." He let that sit for a moment. "I have assigned the pairs myself. I don't want friends working together. I want people who will challenge each other." The class reacted the way classes always react to that kind of news, a low ripple of groans, whispered complaints, a few dramatic sighs from the back row. Do-hyun sat quietly and waited. He was used to being last on lists, an afterthought in assignments, the person nobody wanted to be paired with, and everybody was briefly relieved not to be stuck with. He prepared his face for indifference. Mr. Patterson read through the list slowly. Do-hyun heard his name near the end. Do-hyun. A pause. And Nia. The room reacted before either of them could. A few people laughed. Someone whispered something Do-hyun chose not to hear. He looked straight ahead at the whiteboard. From 2 rows across he felt rather than saw Nia go very still. Then Derek, sitting 1 seat behind her, leaned forward and said something low into her ear that made her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. She didn't respond to him. She just looked at Mr. Patterson like she was waiting for him to move on. Mr. Patterson moved on. After class, Do-hyun packed his bag slowly, the way he always did, waiting for the room to empty before he left so he wouldn't have to navigate the hallway crowd all at once. He was almost at the door when Nia appeared beside him. He hadn't heard her approach, and he startled slightly, which he immediately hated himself for. "Hey," she said. Simple. Direct. Like she had done this 100 times, and it cost her nothing. "Hey," Do-hyun said. "We should figure out when to meet." She shifted her bag on her shoulder. "I have practice Monday and Wednesday after school. Tuesday I'm free after 4. Library okay?" Do-hyun nodded. "Tuesday is fine." She looked at him for a moment in a way that wasn't unkind, but wasn't warm either. It was assessing, like she was trying to figure out what she was working with. Then she nodded once and walked away, and Do-hyun stood in the doorway of the music room and watched her go and thought very carefully about absolutely nothing. Tuesday arrived slowly the way days do when you are dreading something and anticipating it at the same time without being willing to admit either feeling. Do-hyun got to the library at 3:55 and found a table near the back, away from the main entrance, and set up his laptop and his notebook and arranged everything with a precision that he knew was really just nerves expressing themselves as order. Nia arrived at 4:02. She sat across from him, dropped her bag, pulled out a notebook of her own, and looked at him expectantly. "So," she said, "what do you actually know how to do?" It wasn't cruel. It was a genuine question. But it landed with an edge, and Do-hyun felt the familiar instinct to shrink, to say something vague, to offer as little as possible so there was less to reject. He opened his mouth with the intention of saying something safe and noncommittal. Then he stopped. He reached into his bag and pulled out his phone. He found the beat he had been working on, the one with the door swinging open into sunlight, the one he had been refining for almost 2 weeks now. He turned the volume up slightly and slid the phone across the table to her without a word. Nia looked at the phone. Then she picked it up and held it closer and actually listened. Do-hyun watched her face the way you watch a face when everything depends on it, and you are trying to seem like it doesn't. He saw the moment it reached her. It was subtle, a slight shift in her expression, a loosening around the eyes, her head tilting a fraction to one side the way people do when music catches them off guard and pulls them somewhere before they can decide not to go. She listened to the whole thing, 47 seconds of it. Then she set the phone down and looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen directed at him in a long time. It was the expression of someone recalibrating. "You made this," she said. It wasn't a question, but it also was. "Yeah," Do-hyun said. "When? Few weeks ago. Still working on it." She looked at the phone again, then back at him. "Do you have more?" He had 43 beats saved on that phone. He had another 60-something on his laptop at home. He had been making music since he was 12 years old, and he had shown precisely nobody at this school any of it until 30 seconds ago. He nodded. Something shifted in the energy between them. Not dramatically, not like a movie moment with swelling strings. Just quietly, like a room that has been closed for a long time finally getting some air. "Okay," Nia said. She clicked her pen and opened her notebook. "I can write. I've always written. I just never told anyone because..." She paused and then seemed to decide something. "Because people have a version of you in their heads, and if you show them something that doesn't fit it, they get weird about it." Do-hyun understood that completely. He said so. She looked at him like she hadn't expected that, like she had braced for something else. Then she laughed, just briefly, a real laugh, not performed, and Do-hyun felt something in his chest unclench that he hadn't realized was tight. They worked for an hour and a half. It was not seamless. Nia had strong opinions about structure and Do-hyun had strong opinions about sound, and they disagreed twice in ways that got slightly tense before resolving into something better than either of them had originally proposed. At one point, Nia sang a melody over one of his loops quietly, almost to herself, and Do-hyun went very still so he wouldn't interrupt it. Her voice was not perfect. It was real, which was better. At 5:30, she packed up her bag and stood. "Same time Thursday?" she asked. "Yeah," Do-hyun said. "Thursday works." She left. Do-hyun sat at the library table for another 10 minutes, doing nothing in particular. Then he packed up his things, walked home through the cold, went to his room, sat at his desk, and opened the beat. He worked on it until midnight. It was better than it had ever been. The sessions became a rhythm. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, library table near the back, for a clock until whenever the energy ran out. Do-hyun brought his laptop by the third session, and Nia stopped checking her phone by the fourth. The project that had started as an obligation was becoming something else entirely, and neither of them said that out loud, because saying it out loud would have made it fragile. Do-hyun learned things about Nia that the hallway version of her would never have revealed. She had been writing poetry since she was 9. She kept 3 separate notebooks, one for lyrics, one for thoughts she didn't want anyone reading, and one that she described only as the angry one, without elaborating. She had a complicated relationship with her mother who had very specific ideas about what Nia's life was supposed to look like and had been curating those ideas since Nia was old enough to be put in pageants. She loved old soul music, the kind her grandmother played on Sunday mornings, and she had a genuine theory about why Lauryn Hill's first album was structurally perfect that she delivered with an intensity that made Do-hyun want to take notes. Nia learned things about Do-hyun too. That he had been the top music student at his school in Seoul before his family moved. That his father worked 14-hour days at a restaurant and came home too tired to ask how school was going, which Do-hyun did not say with bitterness, but with a kind of quiet acceptance that was somehow harder to hear than bitterness would have been. That he had taught himself English partly through American music, which explained why his vocabulary was excellent, but occasionally came out in unexpected combinations that made Nia laugh in a way she quickly tried to hide, and then stopped hiding because Do-hyun didn't mind. He liked making her laugh. It felt like an achievement that actually meant something. "Say that word again," she said one Thursday, grinning over her notebook. "Which word?" "The one you just used. For the chorus transition." "Atmospheric?" "No, before that." "Melancholic?" "You said it like it had 4 extra syllables." "It does have 4 extra syllables." "Do-hyun, it has 4 syllables total. I know how many syllables it has." "Do you, though?" He tried not to smile. He failed. Nia caught it and pointed at him like she had won something, which she had. It was the kind of conversation that meant nothing and everything simultaneously. The kind that you remember later not because of what was said, but because of how it felt to say it. Easy, unguarded, like exhaling after holding your breath for a very long time. But the world outside the library table had not changed. Marcus found new material in the pairing. He started calling Do-hyun Romeo in the hallways, dragging the word out with exaggerated mockery, his crew echoing it back in a way that was designed to make both Do-hyun and Nia into a punchline simultaneously. Do-hyun absorbed it the way he always did, headphones on, eyes forward, jaw tight. What was new was the anger underneath the absorption. Before it had been a dull ache. Now it had edges. Derek was a different kind of problem. He didn't mock openly the way Marcus did. He was more surgical about it. He would appear at Nia's side in the hallway when he knew Do-hyun was nearby and make a show of being attentive, of draping his arm across her shoulders in a way that was less affection and more territory. He made comments to Nia that were framed as jokes but were calculated, about how she was spending all her time on that project, about how the music class partner situation was kind of sad honestly, about how some people should be grateful anyone was willing to work with them at all. Nia never laughed at those comments. But she didn't challenge them either. Not yet. Do-hyun heard one of them. He was coming around a corner and Derek didn't see him and Nia's face did something complicated, embarrassment and discomfort, and something that might have been guilt, before she noticed Do-hyun standing there. Their eyes met for just a second. Do-hyun looked away first. He kept walking. That Thursday, he was quieter than usual. He pulled up the project file and worked on the bridge without saying much. Nia watched him for a while before she said anything. "Whatever you heard," she said. "That's not. I don't think that." "I know," Do-hyun said. He kept his eyes on the screen. "Do-hyun. I know, Nia. It's fine." It was not fine, and they both knew it, and neither of them had the tools yet to dismantle the wall that had gone up, so they worked in a slightly flattened silence for a while until the music itself pulled them back. That was the thing about the project. When everything else got complicated, the song was still honest. It didn't know how to be anything else. The lyrics Nia had been writing circled around a central image she couldn't quite articulate yet. The feeling of being surrounded by people who reflected a version of you back that you didn't recognize. Do-hyun listened to her read them out loud one evening, and then sat quietly for a moment before he said, "That's the whole song. Everything else is just frame." Nia looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The beat I built. The structure we've been fighting about. All of it should serve that one feeling. That's the emotional intention Patterson kept talking about. That's it." She read the lines again. Then she looked up at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. It was unguarded in a way the hallway Nia never was. Vulnerable without being weak. "How did you hear that?" she said. "When I almost didn't write it." Do-hyun shrugged. "I know what it feels like." She nodded slowly. Something passed between them that was too real for either of them to comment on directly, so they let it settle into the work instead, which was where they both knew how to put things they didn't yet have words for. The following Monday, the escalation arrived in a form neither of them expected. Marcus and two others cornered Do-hyun near the east stairwell before first period. It was early enough that the hallway was mostly empty, late enough that there were no teachers in sight. Marcus didn't touch him. He was smart enough for that. He just stood close, too close, with his arms folded and his chin up in the way that was designed to make the other person feel small. "Heard you and Nia been real close lately," Marcus said. Do-hyun said nothing. "Must be nice. Girl like that spending time on you." Marcus tilted his head. "She feels sorry for you, or what's the situation?" "We have a project," Do-hyun said. His voice was flat. Right. A project." Marcus smiled at his friends. "That what they're calling it?" He stepped slightly closer. "Let me give you some advice. Free of charge. Don't get confused about what's happening there. Girls like Nia don't end up with." He gestured vaguely at Do-hyun in a way that encompassed everything. "This. You understand what I'm saying?" Do-hyun looked at him for a long moment. "I understand everything you're saying," he said quietly. "I just don't care about any of it." He walked away. His hands were shaking, and he put them in his pockets so nobody could see. The shaking in his hands didn't stop until third period. Do-hyun sat in the back of his history class staring at a page he wasn't reading and replaying the stairwell conversation in his head with the clinical detachment of someone trying to understand a thing by examining it from every angle. He wasn't angry at Marcus the way you get angry at someone who surprises you. Marcus had never surprised him. What he was feeling was something closer to exhaustion. The particular exhaustion of having to exist in a space that treated your presence as an inconvenience at best and a joke at worst, day after day, with no end in sight and no door-marked exit. He thought about what Marcus had said. Don't get confused about what's happening there. The honest and uncomfortable truth was that Do-hyun had been having that exact conversation with himself for 2 weeks already. He knew what the sessions in the library were. They were a school project. He knew what Nia was. She was his project partner who happened to be genuine and funny and more layered than anyone in this building gave her credit for. He knew what he was. He was the boy who ate alone and got his lunch tray knocked out of his hands and walked home through the cold to a bedroom studio where the music was the only thing that never looked at him sideways. He knew all of that. He had arranged all of that very carefully in his mind like items on a shelf, each one in its correct place, nothing leaning, nothing at risk of falling. And then Nia had laughed at his pronunciation of melancholic, and the whole shelf had trembled. He was still thinking about this when he rounded the corner toward the cafeteria at lunch and walked directly into the middle of something already in progress. Marcus and his crew were at the center of it. Do-hyun heard his own name before he understood what was happening, not his full name. The nickname Marcus had started using, delivered loudly enough to carry across the cafeteria entrance where a small crowd had already gathered with the hungry attentiveness crowds get when they sense something worth watching. Marcus had Do-hyun's headphones. He had pulled them from Do-hyun's bag somehow, in passing, in the way that predators make things look accidental, and he was holding them up now like a trophy, doing an exaggerated imitation of someone lost in music, stumbling around with his eyes closed while his friends fell apart laughing. Do-hyun stopped walking. He stood at the edge of the crowd and looked at his headphones, his father's headphones, bought before everything changed, before the move, before the restaurant, and the 14-hour days, and the version of his father who came home too tired to ask how school was going. And something happened inside him that he hadn't expected. He didn't go cold the way he usually did. He went very, very still instead, and the stillness was different. It had weight to it. He stepped forward. The crowd noticed and shifted. Marcus turned and saw him and grinned wider because an audience was exactly what he wanted, and Do-hyun walking toward him was a gift he hadn't anticipated. "There he is," Marcus said, spreading his arms. "You want these back? Come get them." Do-hyun kept walking. He didn't say anything. He just walked directly toward Marcus with his eyes level and his face completely unreadable, and something about that, the silence, the steadiness, the absence of fear in his expression, made Marcus's grin flicker for just a fraction of a second before it reassembled itself. "Relax, I'm just. Give them back." Do-hyun's voice was quiet, quieter than the crowd expected. That was what made everyone go still. Marcus looked at him. The grin was working harder now, the way grins do when they're covering something. He held the headphones out to the side, dangling them. "Ask nicer. Give them back," Do-hyun said again. Same volume, same steadiness. Like he had all the time in the world and none of it was going to be spent performing fear for Marcus's entertainment. The crowd had gone genuinely quiet now. This was not the script they were used to. The script had Do-hyun absorbing it, retreating, giving Marcus the reaction that made the whole exercise worthwhile. Do-hyun was not following the script, and nobody quite knew what happened next in a version where he didn't. "Okay, this is done." The voice came from behind Do-hyun. Clear, firm, not loud, but carrying the specific authority of someone who does not need volume to be heard. Nia walked through the crowd the way she always moved through spaces, like she belonged in the center of whatever was happening. Except this time, there was nothing performative about it. She walked past Do-hyun, directly up to Marcus, and held out her hand. "Give me the headphones, Marcus." Marcus stared at her. "Nia, I'm not asking twice." The silence stretched. Derek was somewhere in the crowd. Do-hyun could see him at the edge, watching, his expression doing something complicated. Marcus looked from Nia to the crowd to Do-hyun and back to Nia, and the calculation he ran produced a result he didn't like, but recognized as the only available option. He dropped the headphones into Nia's outstretched hand with a sound that was trying to be casual and landed as something else entirely. Nia turned and walked back to Do-hyun and held them out. He took them. Their fingers didn't touch. They didn't need to. "Thank you," Do-hyun said quietly. "Don't thank me," she said. "They were yours." He had no right. The crowd began to dissolve the way crowds do when the moment has passed, and there's nothing left to witness. Marcus said something under his breath to his crew that was designed to sound like he had won something. Nobody believed it, including him. Do-hyun and Nia stood in the thinning crowd for a moment, and then by unspoken agreement walked outside to the courtyard and sat on the concrete steps in the cold and didn't say anything for a while. The headphones were in Do-hyun's hands, and he was looking at them. "My father bought these," he said eventually. "Before we moved. He said music was the one language that didn't need a visa." Nia looked at him. Something moved across her face that she didn't try to conceal. "That's a beautiful thing to say. He doesn't say things like that anymore." Do-hyun turned the headphones over in his hands. "He's tired now. America tired him out." He paused. "I think he thought it would be different." "Did you think it would be different?" Do-hyun considered that honestly. "I didn't know what to think. I just came." Nia pulled her knees to her chest and looked out at the courtyard. "I've been here my whole life, and I still don't know what to think half the time." She was quiet for a moment. "Derek's going to make this into something. What just happened in there? He's going to have a whole opinion about it." "I know," Do-hyun said. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for that." Her voice had an edge, but it wasn't directed at him. "He doesn't get to have opinions about who I stand up for." She paused. "I should have said something sooner. All those times in the hallway. I saw it and she stopped. I didn't say anything, and that was wrong, and I'm sorry." Do-hyun looked at her. The apology had cost her something, he could tell. He received it carefully. "You said something today," he said. "That's a low bar. It's a higher bar than everyone else cleared." She laughed at that. Not the performed laugh she used in the hallway with her friends. The real one, the one that came out surprised, the one that Do-hyun had decided privately was one of the best sounds he had ever heard, and that he would add that to the list of things he was keeping carefully on the shelf in the correct place with nothing leaning. The shelf trembled again. He let it. For weeks later, they stood at the front of Mr. Patterson's music class with a song that had started as an assignment and become something neither of them could fully explain to anyone who hadn't lived the sessions it was built from. Do-hyun had the backing track running through the classroom speakers. Nia had the lyrics in her hand, but she didn't look at them once. The class listened. Actually listened. The room had the particular quality of silence that only arrives when something real is happening, and everyone present recognizes it even if they can't articulate why. The song moved through its structure the way Do-hyun had always imagined it. Low and heavy at the start, opening up in the middle like a door swinging wide into something brighter, landing at the end in a place that felt like honesty rather than resolution, because honesty was more durable. When it finished, nobody said anything for a moment. Then Mr. Patterson nodded slowly with an expression that meant more than applause would have. Across the room, Marcus was quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. He didn't have a comment. For once, he just didn't have one. After class, they walked out into the hallway together, and Do-hyun put his father's headphones around his neck, and Nia fell in a step beside him, and the school moved around them the way it always did, loud and indifferent and relentless. But something had shifted in the way they moved through it. Not dramatically, not like a movie, just quietly, the way real things shift. A door that had been closed for a long time, finally open, and on the other side of it something that felt, tentatively and honestly, and without any guarantee, like the beginning of being known. Do-hyun didn't think about the shelf anymore. He let things lean. To enjoy more stories, kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more intense stories like this.